Pizza Las Vegas. Shadow. 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 Welcome to a reluctant Fieros' story time with me, Fieros Reborn. I ummed and ahed about this video for a lot longer than I normally would. It was at least 10 seconds of umming and ahhing. Or maybe even 10 minutes. When I went and I kind of went with the final verdict of instead of So yeah, here I am in an video. Yeah, hello. Then I'm gonna follow that up with a burp. Come on. Burp. Hello. Let's get the hands involved again. I'm warming up for the video. Let's get everyone in here. Come on now. In you come. Welcome into the video. Come on. In you come. Sit down. Oh, boy. Okay. Right, so supposedly it's Fieros' storytime video. I am having a midlife crisis, basically. Hopefully it's not my midlife, because I'll only die at the age of 64 then. When I'm 64, I hope I don't die. When I'm 64. Because, I mean, I've never been the most certain being in the world about what it is I want to do with my life, apart from when I was 16, when I really definitely did know what I wanted to do with my life, which was to be in a band, to be an artist. Those two things will do for now. But mainly it was to be in a band, and to be in a successful band. I'm not going to care about whether my hands are being used or not, actually. I don't care if I do anything with them, and I don't care if you see what I do with them, if I do anything with them, like fiddle with my balls under the screen horizon. Oh yeah, the screen horizon. Shh. You are now entering the screen horizon. There we are. Oh, that's a nice angle thing. Yeah, I don't give a crap. I don't give a crap. Crapnoids. I look like a tiny little head in a sea of weirdness. I'm gonna fart as well. Oh, that was a good one. Hello, and welcome to Fieros' Storytime. Burping, farting, and maybe I'll get some nose picking in as well. Shadow. That's a new kind of book I'm writing. I don't know if I'll bother to finish it. It was an idea I had. It started going well, and now I'm like, why do I do these things? Yeah, I'm having a bit of a midlife crisis, a third life crisis, again, because I've completed, like, a major project of Psych Ward, the book. It's composed of Psych Ward 1, 2, 3, and 4, which took me years to complete. In terms of, it took me years, like, therapeutically speaking, in order to get to the point of being able to even want to write it, or to start to write it, or to feel able to write it. Then the actual writing took a hell of a lot longer than I thought it would. The first book that I did took me probably less than 30 days. Yeah. And then each book I did after that was done very quickly, but then I ended up destroying most of what I'd written, because I had this catastrophic, devastational breakup. that just threw my whole world upside down for a period of about a year, really. And then so when I came to finish off the series or the book, because it's one book, I'm going to have it as one book with 4 different little books inside it. They're kind of like acts in a way, like Act 1, 2, 3, and then the 4 bit was kind of acts a bit like an epilogue in a way, I suppose, or I don't know, is it an epilogue? Whatever, you'll have to read it and make it up for yourself what you think it is. But so I did this project. It took me years to do, and I finished it now, and it's not even completed, really, because I need to type up the 3rd part. My dad is still reading that in its bare form. The manuscript, call it manuscript, it's just pages in a refill pad, with handwritten words on it. So I write everything longhand. Well, I did write everything longhand for this project. Shadow project. At the moment, I just wrote the first little part on paper in a refill pad, and then I've done the rest of it in typing. It's just very quick. I can type very quickly these days, and I get a very good translation of what's in my brain direct to the page that way. So it feels almost seamless. There's not much difference between like what I hear or see in my head and what comes out. Every now and again I have a word issue where I'm like, oh, is that the right word? And then I'll have to stick that word elsewhere because I won't be satisfied unless I use that particular word. Yeah. So okay, yeah, but so I finished this kind of project, which took up a hell of a lot of my life, and it's about a hell of a lot of my life, so it both took up time, about 3 years worth of writing, on and off. Obviously I wasn't continuously writing, but there were periods of time where it was every day for a long time, delving into my past, remembering things, trying to render them in words, the written word, on the page, and occasionally doing drawings as well. A long chunk of time devoted to that. And it's finished. It's not completely finished, but I've made a decision basically that I'm not going to do any further creative work in that genre of to that project. Everything else now is just finishing touches in terms of typing up, spelling checks, formatting, table of contents, things like that. I'm not going to do an index. What the hell kind of what novel? It's not a novel, but it's an autobiography. You don't do an index for an autobiography, do you? I don't. Do I? I don't know. Yeah, but everything is just going to be about finishing, basically. It's finishing the thing, finishing touches, and no further creative work. I mean, I could do pictures for it. The initial concept of the book was for it to be a set of graphic novels. But I don't have the energy for that. I really don't. It's so hard to do. It's so hard to draw pictures about that time in my life. I like. It's hard to describe. Why is it hard for me to draw it? Like, I have drawn stuff from that period in my life. I even find it hard to draw like characters consciously. As in, I just really struggle. It drains me so much. It's like I put so much life force energy, or it takes so much life force energy, and I'm not sure why, because it was never like this before. It might be that because of the way that I have learned to draw now, that when I draw characters, they have a certain meaning or value to them that is greater than it used to be, and therefore it takes time. Not time, takes a lot more energy to do than it used to. It's hard. It's weird. I don't understand why I can't just draw on like a cartoon like I used to anymore. Like, it takes up so much kind of emotional processing to just draw a cartoon. It's really bizarre. Yeah. It feels like I'm moving a whole mountain's worth of emotional material just by drawing a little character on a page. It's ridiculous. So, yeah, but I think it's left me with a bit of a kind of vacancy in my life, a sense of vacancy, like what the hell is going to fill this? I don't think this shadow project is really going to do it. It's a kind of horror book, this shadow book. It's a comedy horror, light-hearted horror thing. I'm trying to read a bit to you, a little excerpt out of it now. It's kind of a way I'm just using to face some of my fears. There aren't really even fears anymore, hence me being able to do it, because I've already faced the fears. Let's read a bit of chapter 2, Violence and Sexualized Violence Caused by the Shadow. Hello. Again, it is a warm, sunny September afternoon. I haven't seen the thick black smog of doom hovering in the air for over 2 whole days now. I wonder what happened to it. Well, before I get on with some real work, I thought I should just mention to you a few of the things that happened on my commute today. I mean, quite often old people get in my way as I'm walking along the road. Considering they are near to the end of their lives, I didn't have much, if any, guilt in tripping one of them up, lifting his rucksack off and battering him to death with it. As you can imagine, it would be quite a hard thing to achieve, to batter someone to death with a rucksack. Luckily, he had a full flask of hot chocolate in there, one of those metal ones, so there was enough ballast to make an effective bludgeon. Being old and frail, he didn't put up any resistance either. In fact, as I tripped him up and looked into his frail old grey eyes, I thought I heard him mumble the words, "Thank God I didn't have to end up in a nursing home. Please let this be the end." Then again, I can't be sure. I mean, I was wrestling his bag violently off his back at the time. It was quite a kerfuffle, really, all in all. Something else that annoyed me about this particular old person was his glasses. I don't know why, but I just didn't like them. So, once the old man was dead from his violent beating with the blunt end of a hot chocolate flask-infused rucksack, I decided to remove his glasses, throw them violently and sexually to the floor, and stamp on them. Not being satisfied with the fact that they were destroyed, I decided to make the old man's corpse pay for his terrible choice of personal style. I took a piece of the shattered glass and used it to gouge 2 small holes, one in each of the old man's corpse's eyes. Then I jabbed the end of each prong from the glass's frame, one into each of the small, previously gouged holes in the old man's corpse's eyes. Then I realized that I had not achieved my sexual fulfillment needs for a while, and I had skipped out on my morning masturbation session with one of my severed heads from the laundry basket. This momentarily perturbed me, so I reasoned that, since this old man was newly dead, and therefore subdued from any resistance to my penis, I should use his corpse to copulate a while, in a purely masturbatory way, you understand. I removed the old man's corpse's trousers, removed my own trousers, and penetrated his recently deceased but still warm anus. I penetrated him violently and sexually. Very sexual it was. But I must add, it was purely in the interest of masturbation, and I only did it because I had skipped out on my normal morning masturbation routine of inserting my throbbing penis into the putrefacting mouth of one of my severed heads from the washing basket. In a purely masturbatory way, I might add. So, now that the corpse was suitably defiled to my liking, after having penetrated the old man's corpse's anus repeatedly and sexually and violently, purely for my masturbatory pleasure, you understand, well, I suppose I orgasmed, really. Oh, I forgot to mention that part of the pleasure of masturbating my penis using the dead anus of this old man's corpse was the fact that I was also celebrating my artistic achievements. You know, the piece of art, the glasses with no glass dangling from the small holes that I had gouged with the glass in the old man's corpse's eye sockets. Remember? Yes, well, the way they danced and bounced up and down as I was shagging the newly dead anus of the old man's corpse was rather celebratory, really. I was most pleased with my artistic achievements, as I say. Well, I was refreshed, to say the least. I felt that this had set me up for a few more acts of deviousness before I got to work. I mean, the beating, killing, artifying, and shagging of the old man and his old dead corpse had given me that sense of success that allowed me to feel that I was onto a good day right from the off. So I did a few more little things, more as a sort of technical flourish, if you like. Like how someone might do an elaborate bow after a stirring performance. Yes, just like that. It's almost not worth mentioning those little achievements, though, as they really were only secondary and it might be considered as boasting, but what the hell. I saw a lady pushing a pushchair with a baby inside. Considering I was on a roll since the recent killing and beautifying and fucking of the old man and his old dead corpse, I decided it would be a travesty to my talents if I didn't pick the baby up out of the pram and beat the woman over the head with it. So, not wanting to cause such a travesty to my talents, that's exactly what I did. I picked the baby up out of the pram and used the blunt end of the baby's head to crack open the skull of the woman. You can get quite a swing out of a young baby because their neck muscles haven't fully developed yet, so their head is delightfully mobile. If you can imagine an old knight wielding a mace, if you can imagine an old knight wielding a mace, you know those spiky balls on a chain? If you can imagine that, then you can imagine how I utilise the potential of the baby's fresh and mobile head and neck against its unsuspecting mother. I presume it was her mother anyway. To be fair, it could well have been a nanny or a childminder or some government agent who had been sent to look after the child, since her true mother had been brutally beaten to death some months before with her dead pet rabbit. I can't be sure. I think I would recognise my previous victims, but then again, there are so many of them by now. Maybe I'm overstating my mental capacities of recall somewhat. Anyhow, both the baby and the presumed mother were now dead and resting in peace on the floor, blood swirling around from the epicenter of the two heads that were now mutually caved in. As I understand it, the baby's head cracked first, having a weaker skull and all, but this was no trouble, because there was still enough bone material to make an effective bludgeon. You would have thought that the woman would have resisted my attacks, eh? But I could have sworn that as I was unfastening the clips on the baby's pushchair harness, I heard the woman say, "Please, this baby is a nightmare. She is so draining. I have no time for myself any more. Please kill us both and put us out of our misery." Then again, I was concentrating quite hard on those clips, because they are quite fiddly, you know. She did say it under her breath too, so I can't exactly be sure what she said precisely. I don't know whether I should mention what I did next, as some of you might find it a bit vulgar. I mean, maybe I took the next bit too far. I mean, I had already had my fill of sexual fulfillment from the dead man's old dead corpse just earlier. So I'll hold my hands up and admit that it was a bit greedy of me to rape the baby in her anus while squeezing the newly dead breasts of the woman whose head was now caved in. In a way, I was glad that their heads were caved in and that blood was everywhere, because they were both a little ugly, if you ask me anyway. So I didn't have to look at anything particularly unsightly as I was rogering the baby in her freshly dead and young anus. I also didn't have to utilise any paper bags, nor cardboard boxes to cover the ugly face of the woman either. Considering her head was satisfactorily caved in, her face was obscured by that fact, and I was pleased to note it, as I fucked the baby in her fresh and young dead arsehole, while I squeezed the woman's breasts, which of course were dead, but still rather warm, similar to the old man's corpse's anus in that sense. I regard the fact that their ugliness was destroyed as more of an incidental perk. It wasn't my primary motivation for the kill. I've already told you that my motivation was to keep my flow of success going and to make sure my talents were accurately represented by my activities. Good. Now, I realised that after having spunked up inside the newly dead baby's fresh young anus, I should really not leave them lying around on the street for other people to trip over. So, as a courtesy to the other pathwalkers / street users, whatever you want to call them, I picked both the carcasses up and threw them off the nearby bridge and into the river. Thus, the path was clear, although a little slippery with blood, bits of skull bone, and a little dribble of spunk, but some things just can't be helped. And that about accounts for the activities of my commute. Oh yes, I did make eyes with a young, fresh teenage girl as I walked past her on my way to work. I must say, though, by this time I was a bit drained from my exploits previously, and I almost didn't bother to rip off her top, rip off her bra, seize her by the nipples, and rip off her breasts forcefully, violently, and sexually. But I did. As I say, I was a little reluctant to do it, but I thought if I didn't, I'd only regret it and kick myself for the missed opportunity later. So I did. I went up to the fresh young teenage girl, who I noticed didn't have any spots, by the way. So why did I do it? Mainly because I was on a roll, and I've already told you, an opportunity is an opportunity, and these opportunities don't come around in the same way each day, so you must seize those opportunities as they arise. Otherwise, those opportunities are lost forever. And then where would we be, eh? Exactly. So, reluctantly and with a heavy heart and a slight feeling of drainedness, I ripped off the young girl's teenage top, ripped off the young teenage girl's I ripped off the young teenage girl's top, ripped off the young teenage girl's bra, seized the young teenage girl by her nipples, and ripped off the young teenage girl's breasts. Sexually and violently, I might add. It was very sexual and very violent, and I most certainly did get a subtle thrill out of the sexual nature of it, and also a subtle thrill was present in the violent nature of it also. As I say, this was more of an incidental bonus. If she had not been there, if I had not been on a roll, then I'm sure I wouldn't have done anything of the sort. I mean, I had already quite a thrill from the killing of the old man, the young fresh baby, and the ugly woman, so I didn't really need to do it. I didn't need to get that thrill from ripping the young teenage girl's breasts off by the nipples, but I just thought it would be unwise not to. I wouldn't want to set up a habit where I no longer seized opportunities as they arose, because it would most certainly damage my killing career long term to do that. Also, what would people think of me if I hadn't done it? These are the sorts of things we have to think about, you see. Of course, the young teenage girl wasn't too happy with the pain in her newly created breast cavities, nor was she best pleased with the blood spurting out of her newly created breast cavities, which was now spurting all over her teenage girl friends. Girl friends, not girlfriends. I must make that clear, because sometimes women and girls say "my girlfriends," and if you're not wise to these if you're not wise to these terminologies, then you might think these women and girls mean that they have many lesbian sexual partners. I assure you it is not the case. They mean girl friends, that is to say, friends who are girls. I'm glad I cleared that up. Well, yes, the teenage girl with her newly created breast cavities was not best pleased with either her newly created breast cavities nor the blood spurting out all over her girl friends. Some people really aren't very grateful, are they? I didn't have time to appease her with a trophy fucking, unfortunately. I was feeling a little limp-dicked after all the shagging of corpses from earlier. I mean, to be fair to myself, I had fucked an old man's dead corpse and a fresh young baby's dead anus, and an ugly woman who I presume to be the baby's mother, but as I say, I can't be sure. So, that about wraps up the day's commuting activities. I then just went to Starbucks and bought a cup of hot chocolate, remembering the good times of the flasks from earlier, and cracked on with my workday. I won't mention the plans I concocted for the Starbucks barista, whom I hadn't seen in a while. He was an enemy, so he deserved a much more elaborate plan and some meticulous execution, wink wink, of said plan. But I won't mention it now, because I need to crack on. I wonder what happened to that thick black smog after all. So that was chapter 2. What is it? Violence and sexualized violence caused by the shadow. So it's obviously ridiculously silly horror book, which is just me trying to be as gross as I can possibly think in order to gross myself out to the point where I no longer fear my own grossness, I suppose. Yeah. Anyway, so that's that. If you wish to give me a round of applause, now is the time. Here we go. Very good. Thank you. So, what else? Oh, yeah. So I was just saying, yeah, it's fun to do that, but it kind of gets a bit sickening after a while to be writing about all this gross stuff. And I don't feel like I want to do it for very long, to be honest, but whatever, I'll see. I mean, I don't really have any other ideas for it. I've done 3 chapters and I'm like, can't be bothered. We'll see what happens. Yeah, and so I've been thinking about what am I going to do after these videos, because I have said repeatedly that I'm going to stop doing these videos and leave it until 2020. And I've been thinking more about that, and I'm thinking I am actually serious about that, aren't I? I am actually serious about that. And I've been thinking, what am I going to do afterwards? And stand-up comedy is one of the main things that comes to mind. But I've also been feeling weird today. Like, I mean, I'm hungover, but I don't mean that. I mean, that's not a weird feeling to me. I know what that feels like. But I just woke up and I had this temporary obsession with the lack of meaning in my life. It lasted about an hour in the morning. I say morning. The morning after a hangover is like from 12 p.m. onwards, isn't it? That's the morning. I was kind of preoccupied for a while of thinking about the sense of meaning, and there's not much of a sense of meaning in my life. And it's odd. It's not a consideration I've really had before. I mean, I have actually had that kind of, but before my questions about meaning were to do with what is meaning, a more abstract sense of like what counts as meaning, or what is meaningfulness, what is a meaningful life, or like what is the meaning of life, is there any meaning in life, and what I came up with back then, this is when I was depressed, actually, when I was really preoccupied with trying to understand meaning, or get some sense of meaning in life, and finding that there wasn't much sense of meaning in my life. But yeah, what I found, or what I discovered, or what I reasoned in a philosophical kind of way, was that meaning is not an object. So, like, obviously, there's not an item. You can't say, oh, this is a meaning. This is meaning. And the meaning of life does not arrive as an object in that same sense as being a physical, tangible object. You can't go and buy a packet of meaning in the same way that you can buy a packet of crisps. So it's obviously not a physical object, but you do seem to be able to arrive at a sense of meaning, so what I'm kind of saying there is that there's no objective, singular meaning of life, and I also found that that applies to the point as well. The point of life. What's the point of life? It's a similar question, I think, to meaning, but point implies purpose. Point seems to say, like, when you say what's the point, it's like, what is the purpose? So what are we moving towards? And the only ever answer to that is death, or oblivion, or change of form, or dissolution, because that's
progress of life leads to that. My life will one day merge into nothingness, and the things that I leave behind will carry on for a certain period of time, but there will be a point in the history of the universe where nothing is remembered of this body whatsoever, and the impact of this life will be so diffuse out into the universe that it will be unobservable. Yeah. That's a depressing thought, I suppose. But then, if you can fart, then who gives a toss? I used to find that really quite a depressing thought. That it's kind of like there's a part of me that wants to live forever, I suppose. And there's a part of me that wants to stay the same forever as well. So there's a part of me that wants to like to have the whole of life just be in a fixed and frozen state, so that I can live forever, and so nothing ever changes, kind of thing. And I want to, there's like some deep, deep part in me that wants to be remembered, wants to make an impact, wants for there not to be an end to that impact as well. So it's kind of comparable in a way to when Hitler was saying that his Reich would reign for 1,000 years. It's that kind of delusion of grandeur, partly, or that grandiosity of that my little self here should be important eternally. That I want something of me to always be there. And it's also coupled with the fear of death, I suppose, because I don't want to have death. It's sort of, for ages I struggled with what is the meaning of life if there is death, because the point of death, as in at the moment of death, everything that comes before it is rendered utterly meaningless, surely, because you can't take any of it with you. Everything disappears in that moment, as in, your body is going, your body is gone, and everything you've done previously, and everything you own, and everyone you're with, all of those things are going to disappear from you in some way, as in, like, your body is done. There's nothing more for that, and then it disappears, like your spirit or whatever disappears. So I was trying to figure out, because a lot of our culture is very goal orientated, oriented, to be oriented. I don't know. Yeah, we're very goal focused. Yeah, and the ultimate goal, if you project out in terms of goal seeking, goal achieving, well, you can't continuously goal achieve or be activity based, because there's an end point to it. So goal achieving and dream achieving, whatever, achieving your goals and dreams, there's a point where you cannot do that anymore because you're dead. So I was trying to reason through this idea of, like, what sense does life make if at the end of it all goes to shit? As in, what's the point in, oh god, there was a bug there, I think. A bug. Whew. What's the point of it? Yeah, that's the reasoning. What's the point of it all if it's all going to end? And if every experience is constantly moving from one state to another, then what's the point of it all? Like, what meaning can be gained from that if any meaning that you do gain gets erased? That was my question. And it was a repetitive, over and over and over again type of question as well. And that started, I think I've already spoken about this in a previous video, but that started when my granddad died. So in a way, it was a grief. I think that thought pattern was really part of a grief experience that had not been fully resolved, because I started that thought pattern when my granddad died, and I believe that if I want to think about it in terms of psychology and emotions, that I didn't grieve fully for my granddad when he died. I repressed it or pushed it down and didn't go into it deeply enough to make sense of it, and I didn't have a little bit of help from my parents. My mum, she showed me this tape of my granddad speaking, an audio tape, cassette tape, of him speaking, and we listened to that together, and I cried a bit then. But other than that, that's all I really did at that time, and the rest was just the kind of internal, sudden bleakness, really, a realization of the bleakness of life, and I suppose a sense of nihilism, a sense of depression as well, came in around that time in my life. Yeah, okay, so anyway, go back to what I was saying earlier on. So what is the point of life? Because purpose in terms of life only goes so far, because there's an end point. So what is the purpose of life? Purpose only applies really until you're kind of starting to approach death, because then there is no purpose anymore, because you're about to die. So you have no more active purposeness. There's no further goals to achieve. There's no further sense to be made even of life. That purposefulness of moving towards something and orientating towards things or building things or whatever starts to fall away, because there's no purpose. Like, purpose implies intelligence and activity and action. There's something you can do about it. There's something you're moving towards, purposeful, intentional, trying to achieve things or direct your life in a certain way. And there isn't purpose in the ending phase of life, because, not in that same way anyway. You could say probably the purpose is to face death with dignity, or to face your deepest realization of life at that point. But it's not purposeful in the same way that you can be purposeful about creating a family or creating a house or creating a business or whatever, which is a different kind of sense of purpose, isn't it? So point, I realized then as well that point, even the word point, when you think about what is a point, what is the point, it refers to a narrowing. What's the point of a pencil tip? And this is actually how I came to this understanding. I thought, well, what's the point of life? And if you narrow in, you think of, well, what does point mean? Point, purpose, it's a narrowing in of focus, a concentration, if you like. So what is the point of life? What's the point of life? But there isn't, the question doesn't really apply, because life doesn't have a point in that same way as arguments can have a point. For example, life, as we see it and as we experience it, doesn't have that same point, rational point, if that makes sense. It doesn't have a narrow, singular point in terms of like a fixation. It doesn't have that. So the question, I realise, doesn't apply, or is a incorrect question to ask. What's the point? Because it's not. Life itself does not have a point. It does not have a narrow focus, because life is more of a diffuse, all-encompassing thing. So it doesn't have a point in that sense. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I was quite pleased with those understandings, and in a way, the thinking through that, going through that thought process, just kind of stopped me from over obsessing about it. Like, I was obsessing about it for ages, like trying to figure out, well, what is the fucking point of life if we're all going to die? And then I drew this just triangle point thing, like, and I thought, that's the point of life. And you look at the top of it and you say, well, it's pointy. What's the point of life? It's very pointy. So I did this. I went, this is the point of life. Right? That's the point of life. And I guess that helped me to just sort of make fun of it. The whole, what's the point? Because I realized as well, I had these thoughts going around in my head that were saying, oh, what's the point of it? What's the point? What's the point? What's the point? And I realized I wasn't taking the time to even investigate the answer to that question. I was just asking the question in a depressing kind of way. Oh, what's the point? What's the point? And I never bothered actually going, well, let's think of the answers to that question then, rather than just say the question over and over again in my head. So I took some time to think, well, what is the point then? Like, investigate that question and come up with answers to it. What is the point? I couldn't think of anything really. I came up with various different ones, to be fair. Stuff like happiness, joy, creativity, expansion, fulfillment, things like that. But none of them really fully got to the nub of it. And that's because there isn't a point. Like, if you zoom in on that, and you keep zooming in, it's just going to turn out to be like this bigger and bigger thing. And then you go into the like pen, like magnify into the pen mark, like the actual ink, and then it just becomes this giant red thing. And then you magnify into it more, and then you start seeing molecules and shit. And then you magnify into it more, and you see atoms and shit. And like, so there is no point, because even in this picture, the more you analyze and look further and deeper into everything, the more it expands outwards. In fact, like, your perception of it suddenly gets that everything becomes massive and expansive. So, in fact, there is no narrow pointedness to life. There is no singular rational point of life or point of anything. In fact, that there is no final point. There's no final ending of a rational discussion, or of a life even. There's no final defining singular point, and that helped. Yeah. And then back to the thing that I started off saying, which is about the sense of meaning. So I realized as well that meaning is, again, it's not like you can write down in a sentence, this is what the meaning of life is, and then have it be correct. You have to, what I realized, this is personal though, is that meaning, it comes as a sense. You sense when things are meaningful. Sometimes things appear very, very meaningful, like, and you may not be able to know why exactly they're meaningful to you. Even if you investigate that and try and pick it apart, like, why does this mean so much to me? You may find yourself perplexed by a mystery, even if you go into therapy and try and understand why is this so meaningful to me, and you reach a point where your ability to comprehend and understand it falls away, and it's just this kind of deep mystery. But the meaning of life, again, is not a singular package or entity. It's not like you can say the meaning of life is happiness and have it be correct, because the meaning of life is happiness. I don't even know what does that even mean. The meaning of life is to be happy. It just doesn't make any sense. It feels very narrow, because that doesn't seem to allow for anything else to be possibly meaningful. That makes sense. So experiences in life can have a sense of meaning to them, and you're not happy necessarily. You could be quite destroyed by it, but they can still have a sense of having been meaningful or important, or to give you a sense of meaning. So yeah, so my philosophical understanding of the meaning of life came about when I did a lot of kind of investigation into it, just from my own thinking, reasoning. And I wrote a load of this stuff down, just trying to get to grips with it for myself, really, because it was really troubling me to understand meaning. Yeah, so the best thing I came up with was that you can have a sense of meaning, that things, you sense the meaning of stuff. You sense that experiences are meaningful. You can experience, it's kind of a sensation. It's an emotional sensation, emotional spiritual sensation that you experience where you know that what is going on or what has happened has been meaningful or is meaningful. And it's not anything necessarily specific. It's just things all come together and cohere in such a way that you understand that life is meaningful. And it's like you can't just write that down and say, oh, this is the meaning of life. It's like, no, you understand that life is meaningful when you just sense that life is meaningful. Yeah, and there's no point. You cannot define what will bring that about for you. I suppose if anything, all you can do is really just be attuned into yourself and into your surroundings and into other people, and into your own life, and reflect on your life, and then you will occasionally have moments where you have a deep appreciation for the meaning of life, as in that life is meaningful, but not necessarily have a particular meaning, a specific meaning to draw from it, but that you get this sense that overall and deep down life is richly meaningful. Yeah, okay, fine. Now what? So I've covered point, purpose, meaning, sense of meaning. This is the point of life. Little tip of there. And I realised when I did this drawing, I realised the question is nonsensical. It's ridiculous to think that there is a singular point that you can think and you can have in your mind, and that's correct and satisfactory, because it's not like that. Because look at that. That's essentially what I'm trying to say with my mind, is that somehow I will be able to focus life into being a singular little sharp pointy thing. I just thought bollocks to it. What if the point of life was blunt? So that's my wisdom for you for today. Okay. Oh yeah. So back to the beginning of the video. I'm having a midlife crisis. A third of a life crisis, because I did all that writing of the book, which helped me feel a sense of meaning, to be fair. And now I'm a bit kind of like, what am I doing? What am I doing? What's next? What am I supposed to be doing? Like, this sudden question of purpose again is coming in, like, and meaning, in terms of like, well, what am I doing in my life for other people, or to get a sense of connection, and what is it really that I want in my life anyway? What is it? What am I here to do? That kind of thing. I can sit here and make videos and do artworks and stuff, but is that even really what I want to do? I mean, I've devoted a hell of a lot of my life to these practices and crafts and stuff, like, art and speaking and comedy and music and writing and stuff. And I don't know, is this what I want to do? Because if I do want to do it, I have to really commit to it, because I'm going to have to take it to the next level. Yeah, and maybe that is a daunting thing, because all my creative stuff has been at a certain level of non-success for ages, where it's been kind of local success in terms of like, my band was successful originally for a little bit, in terms of we got people to come along to our gigs, and we won some competitions and stuff like that. And then my second band was also vaguely successful in that people would come to our gigs, but at that point it's starting to feel a bit like, God, this is more work than we are getting results for, because it was harder somehow to generate an interest in a band. And we were doing okay, but we didn't have any major success. We weren't being paid for what we do. I think that's a real indicator of my success, is if I'm being paid for my creative exploits. Yeah, I mean, oh man, I went through a whole phase over the last year or so about really, really struggling with the fact and the ideas of money and creativity, and what my integrity was regarding that. And I had this kind of, I don't want to do anything if I'm not being paid, so I stopped doing stuff for a while. Then I had the idea of, well, I still want to do it anyway, whether I'm being paid or not. And now it's like I have minimal ideas about about anything. I have minimal ideas in the brain. I used to have all these kind of rules and stuff like, oh, don't play covers. I don't like to play covers, or no integrity in playing covers. And now I'm like, I don't care. You could say I got over myself. I just play covers, don't play covers. But do I even want to? Do I want to do anything as well? Like, do I want to do my own songs? Do I want to do covers? It doesn't really matter that much. I place such kind of a big importance to this artistic integrity thing, and now I'm like, why did I think that it mattered so much? If I wasn't doing this line of work, it wouldn't have mattered at all. So why was I so obsessed with this kind of feeling of integrity or artistic integrity? Because again, at the end of the life, who gives a toss? Have integrity, don't have integrity. You can have fun either way, you know. And I realised it's kind of being kind of judgmental on other people. I certainly recognised that last night, where basically I was at this open mic night, and the guy who was playing really reminded me of me, and he sort of seemed to represent what I could have been doing had I continued on being a covers musician, like a solo covers musician in a covers band as well. Because there's something about the way the guy dressed even reminded me of how I used to dress, with a little like wristband thing on, which I remember I used to have a wristband thing, and just like something about, I don't know, something about the way he was operating reminded me of how I used to be when I was more deeply involved in live music. And he was playing all the songs that he played. Sorry, all the songs he played, I knew the words to because I'd done those as cover songs myself. Yeah, or I just knew those words because I knew those songs really well. But he played basically a covers set that I could have played because I had played all those songs in cover sets before. And I thought, this guy is me had I continued on down the covers route line. And there wasn't anything wrong with it. As in, like, for a while in my life, I was really judgmental of covers because I think that covers as a whole premise is damaging overall for original music. Like, we have a dead scene in Windsor, because everyone only plays covers, and covers are the only things that people will pay you to play. So what that has led to over a course of years is there are no original bands anymore, and if there aren't many places, if any, to see them play. They have to go to festivals, like the sort of smaller festivals, to get playtime, woo. And yeah, but just like overall in this area, it's a dead scene, as I say, dead scene, dead scene, dead scene, dead scene. And I don't think anyone really feels like they can be successful in music anymore at this time. Anyway, so I was really against covers for ages, and now I don't have the same antagonism towards it. I don't care as much. I'm like, yeah, but it's weird because I had this real passion for original music and it was not being represented on the scene, and now I just don't care anymore. It's weird because I've suddenly dropped the kind of antagonism towards the way things are. So I'm just like, oh, that's how it is, and I can enjoy it. And okay, I'm not in the right place, really. This is not the best, most supportive place for me to be in because there is a dead scene, but I can still enjoy what is here to the level that it allows me. I'd rather be elsewhere, and I'd rather there be a vibrancy, and I'd rather there be opportunities and support and a feeling of encouragement for original music, and original bands have a vibrant set of places to play, and that there's a sense of expansion and possibility around success and being paid for your music. That would be great. But it's not that way, is it? It's not that way. So I'm like, and I've also just kind of relaxed, I suppose, is relaxed about. I used to kind of be very judgmental in my head about how other people were leading their lives and comparing them to my standards. As in, I would be saying to myself, like, oh, they have no integrity because they're doing covers. And therefore, I could feel superior in a way because I felt like having integrity by not doing covers made me somehow more valuable as a person or as a musician. But it just boils down to basically a sense of moral superiority because of a set of codes that I live by, which is not actually a cohesive thing to do. It pushes people away. It's a judgmental thing to do, to say that because I live in this way, therefore my life is better than yours, or my work is better than yours. So, yeah. So I saw him last night, and I was thinking I could have done that, and I chose not to because it didn't resonate with me. So there was a lot to take in from that night last night. Like, I watched this guy set up his equipment because I was the only person in the venue as well. And so I was taking time to realise I'm fucking by myself again in a shitty fucking venue, about to watch a bunch of covers that I've heard a million times before. And I'm in the wrong area and I don't have any friends with me. And it's kind of boring in a way. It's also a bit lonely. It's a bit depressing. I'm basically, it was me and this old man in the pub who were first there. And I thought, I've skipped out about 30 years and gone straight to the point where I'm the drunk old man at the bar. I'm the drunk old man by himself with no friends at the bar. I've turned into that. I've skipped out 30 years worth of development and loneliness and isolation, and I've just gone straight to that point. And now I'm starting from there. Well, I don't know why I'm laughing at that. It's not very funny, really, is it? But it is in a way, because. But then I actually had a really good time. I had a really good time. It was only for a while when the guy was setting up that no one else was there, and then people come in, and it was quite a good night. Yeah. So weird, and I was like, I don't really want to be around any other people though. Particularly, I feel like I'm moving towards reintegrating and having a more a wider friend group or a wider social influence. But I've really wanted to just take time to be by myself by choice, to rest from overly socializing for a number of years, and just wanted to just kind of be a bit more reclusive, be a bit more hermit like, and give myself the opportunity to not do anything, to sit about and to waste my parents' money while while I don't have a job and so on, and to actually give myself the teenage years that I never fully had properly because I was forced out into the working world. Make it sound like I worked for sort of some Oliver Twist kind of workhouse, Victorian workhouse, and it wasn't like that. But I just felt like when I first went into the working world, I was pressured into it by my family to get a job, and I just wasn't ready for it, and I got fired quite quickly as well. And I've never liked the working world. I think it's ridiculously pressuring. Um, and I think I wasn't really emotionally strong enough to deal with the working world when I first went into it. I would have liked to have had my first job after I'd finished school at the age of 18 would probably have been better because I would have had more chance to develop my emotional maturity before I then took on a bigger challenge of having an actual job. It's just a personal thing, you know. Some people love the working world and love their job and the sense of being in a job. Personally, I have always hated having a job or being in a job. Since I first had it, it was always a hassle and annoyance. It was always getting in the way of my creative work and my creative activities. uh, yeah, like it's never been what I wanted to do to have a job. Then again, it does have some perks to it, obviously money, but it has the having a job has the positive aspect of making new connections, making new friends, getting a girlfriend, having money, having social status as well, fitting in, easy conversation starters. Like trying to explain what I do to people, I always feel weird. They go, I almost forget that I even do anything sometimes. They ask me what do you do, and I'm like, oh, nothing. And then they say, what? And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't do anything for a living. Oh, but I do these 25,000 things, by the way. Yeah. But my initial thought is, oh, I don't do anything. I sit about, and then occasionally I write songs, occasionally I draw pictures, and occasionally I do videos, and occasionally I write books. um, but I don't know, it's just weird. It doesn't feel the same as like when someone's telling you and hassling you to do something. I just do it because I want to do it. So, I haven't covered the story, but anything of the story today, apart from a little period in the thing where I was depressed, but that was after hospital. We haven't even got to the point of me being in hospital yet in the story. We are still stuck in the period of time where I was causing chaos like a rapscallion. The time I went round Slough proclaiming I was God. Oh, that's less exciting than I thought it would be. Maybe I'll start that next time. The time I went round Slough proclaiming I was God. That's a good story. That should be fun, even though I don't know exactly what the meaning of the story is. Like sometimes you tell a story and you know that there's the point of it. The point of it is that it's a sad story, or the point of it is that it's a fun story, or the point of it is that there is a lesson to learn from it. Like, don't do this again, or and then I learned the reason of life. No, I don't know what exactly the point of it is. Point! This has been such a weird, roundy video. I'm going to eat pizza.